welcome to another episode of Ask a Pianist. My name is Andrew Aarons, and today I'll be addressing a question which frequently comes up when students are learning fast-moving music that requires a delicate or gentle sound. When we play fast, it's quite easy to play with a loud, percussive sound, because in many ways this requires far less control. But if we're tasked with playing soft music that should flow like oil, how do we maintain technical control and still create a sound quality that is producing what we want to hear? On this episode, we'll focus on a concept that combines knowledge of the instrument and knowledge of our physical capabilities. This concept is called playing above the escapement. What is the escapement? I'll give you a very basic explanation. It's a technical term that refers to a specific moment that occurs while we press down a key. As the key goes downwards, the piano action engages to throw the hammer up to the string, dependent upon the speed and acceleration of key depression. Just like throwing a ball to someone, the piano action throws the hammer. Actions of harpsichords, clavichords, and organs are essentially seesaws, where you press down a key to move something, and when you release the key, whatever moved is returned to its original position. If this kind of action were used on the piano, the hammer would strike the string and stay in contact with it until the key were released. This would unfortunately result in the string being dampened by the felt of the hammer, thus creating just a dull thud rather than a note. In order to prevent this, the piano action has an escapement that allows the hammer not only to be thrown free of the lever system, but to be caught afterwards and held until the key is released. This prevents the hammer from bouncing around and accidentally interfering with the strings again. There's another element here that's important to know, however. If the hammer has been disengaged from the action after the throw, then how are we able to repeat notes very fast on the piano? Wouldn't this kind of action require the key to return to the full original position in order to reset? Well, the way the action is designed, the key only has to rise a little bit in order to become playable again. The escapement re-engages at a point while the key is still depressed slightly, so that you can replay the key if you need to. Why do we need to know all this? Well, the control mechanisms on the piano are the direct link that we have as pianists to the sound we produce, and the more knowledge we have about this, the better we are at controlling it. On the surface, and to those who do not play the piano actively, the keyboard resembles that of a typewriter or a computer keyboard, where all you have to do is press the right key at the right time in the right order, and you magically produce music. This is what happens on digital keyboards. But the piano action affords us a tremendous amount of control over how the hammer strikes a string, and this control is what produces soft and loud sounds, and percussive and non-percussive sounds. Now that we know what the escapement is, how does all this relate to playing fast music softly? If we push the key down very slowly, there is a little bump that we can feel which happens just before we get to the bottom. That bump is the point where the escapement engages. If we push the key all the way to the bottom, the key will not replay the note if we don't move it back up beyond the bump. In plain terms, this would mean that repeated notes require the key to return far enough so that the action re-engages. If we're playing loudly, then this is never a problem, because the energy we put into the key almost encourages the key to rebound above this threshold automatically. If we're playing softly, though, the key is most likely moving a lot slower, which means that we might encounter problems like the key not repeating when we need it to. This lack of repetition becomes a problem when we have pieces like Ondine by Ravel. The piece opens with repeated chords that alternate with single notes in a pattern like this. The only problem is that this is supposed to be much faster and to be played triple piano. Students who come to this piece for the first time encounter quite a strange technical difficulty. It needs to be fast, and the easiest way to play this figure fast is to play it loud, like this. But the figure also needs to be played at a triple piano dynamic. The easiest way to play that softly is to do so a little slower, like this. Now, when we try to combine fast playing with soft playing, the problems arise. Either we end up playing it fast, but we can't get the volume down enough, like this. That's using the una corda pedal. Or we can play it softly, but the notes don't repeat properly, like this. The only way to get this to work as written is to find out where the escapement bump is and to play above it. In other words, you're pushing the key down just enough to pass the escapement, but not all the way to the bottom. In this way, the key has to move less distance back up in order to reset for a repetition. I'll play this pattern all the way to the bottom of the key at the speed I want, and slowly adjust it so that I'm not aiming for the bottom anymore, but I'm aiming for the bump. There will be a slight change in sound quality, it will become a lot softer, and it will work without losing the repetition potential. What this all leads to is an opening that appears like it's coming out of nothing. Playing above the escapement is not only useful in special effects, like the shimmering effect in Ondine. Sometimes we have a melody that is accompanied by the same shimmering effect all throughout a piece, and this can be very difficult for pianists to approach. There's always the danger that the accompaniment will overpower the melody, and playing above the escapement can help remove that danger. Schubert's G-flat major impromptu has just such an accompaniment, played mainly in the right hand underneath the main melody. We have the classic Schubert babbling brook accompaniment, and it's very close to the melody in terms of register, which means that if we don't control it properly, it can overwhelm the sustaining power and cause us to strain, trying to keep the melody above it. Like the Ravel, in this piece we are asked to begin quite softly, this time only pianissimo, and like the Ravel, we have to play this pretty fast. If we played to the bottom of the keys, we'd get a very present and somewhat loud accompaniment, like this. So, like before, all we have to do is adjust and aim to play just over the escapement, and we'll get something like this. Playing above the escapement affords several advantages. including, but not limited to, the special sound quality it creates. If we play above the escapement, it means that we have the option to play through the escapement once in a while, if a specific note requires it. This automatically creates a kind of sound definition which can separate acoustically a melody from an accompaniment, if they occur in the same hand, like what happens in the Schubert. If I played the whole hand above the escapement, we'd get this. But if I play only the bottom notes above the escapement, and the top melody notes through and below the escapement, then we get two different sound qualities, and a separation of melody and accompaniment like this. There's even better news. Playing above the escapement is very easy on the hands. It doesn't require much effort, which means that we end up having more endurance with this kind of technique. Schubert's Impromptu here is about 3 to 4 minutes of constant motion, and on first sight it seems daunting, but in reality it's quite comfortable to play if one knows where to aim one's descent of the key. Playing above the escapement works wonders when used in difficult accompaniments. It frees up the keys for easy repetition, and it keeps the sound transparent, allowing melodies to sing over it. But what happens if our melody is made up of lots of notes, maybe scales and arpeggios that need to be soft and effortless in execution? Well, playing above the escapement comes to the rescue once again. Chopin's Berceuse has a few points where, in typical Chopin fashion, he asks you to play lots of notes in very little time, all very soft and flowing, without a hint of any accents or technical problems. The top register of the piano in particular is rather unforgiving. Mistakes are very easily heard, and any subtle inequality in our fingers will result in unwanted and rather offensive accents. This is because the amount of weight necessary to depress the key is less than in the bass register. It's easier to play a key higher up than it is lower down. This means that small deviations in our technique or articulation will manifest themselves in the upper registers, whereas they will be eliminated in the bass registers due to the weight. It's like the difference between pushing a bicycle and pushing a car. The bicycle can be easily pushed off course by a small mistake, whereas the car will absorb the mistake due to its mass. With the Berceuse, it's possible to play this section aiming for the bottom of the key. The result is not ideal, but certainly not unacceptable. But we have the option here to make the melody float a bit. By playing only to the escapement instead of to the bottom of the key, we not only create a sound quality that is a little more special and less grounded than the other, but we also free up our fingers and hands so that the melody can be played in a little more flexible manner when it comes to rubato or swing. Do you remember the Schubert example, where I talked about playing most of the notes to the escapement and some selective ones beyond the escapement? Well, the Chopin example here allows us to do the same. We can select specific notes within patterns to increase the sound complexity of the run, and arguably increase the beautiful element of the music. Listen for the bottom voice I create when I get to the top of the run. Now this effect is quite subtle and is completely arbitrary, but it is an option that is made far easier to execute if we understand how to play to the escapement and beyond it. Finally, there are times when playing above the escapement becomes more of the norm than a special effect. In the first arabesque of Debussy, we find a melody which is essentially the babbling brook of Schubert, but without a top melody. In this case, we play above the escapement as the normal sound throughout most of the piece, and it's only when we get louder or move to a different character section that this playing style is changed. If we were to play this opening down to the bottom of the keys, as an example, we'd have a very weighted and pronounced piece, something which probably would not be able to be called gentle. I would argue that in fact this piece absolutely requires playing to the escapement, not only for the resulting sound quality and character that is created, but also to allow the musical material to flow properly and organically. To do it the other way destroys that sound. Instead of this, it must be like this. The escapement and the feeling of the escapement all differ between instruments. For grand pianos, it's rather consistent, and once you find it on a given instrument, you'll know where to look in other ones. Upright pianos, however, have a very different action, and the feel of the keys is also quite different. It should be noted that the concepts I've addressed in this episode apply to grand pianos. On uprights, the effects may not be as obvious. What I would suggest is that when you're practicing, try to find the escapement on your keyboard, and then practice playing to the escapement and also playing beyond it. You'll find a whole new world of sound and technical possibilities once you learn how to control this aspect. So, that's it for this episode of Ask a Pianist. For now, keep making music, and I'll see you again soon. Bye for now.